Stormont ministers say they'll continue to press the government to extend a law to Northern Ireland that will quash convictions of sub-postmasters affected by the post office scandal.
So the legislation was introduced in Parliament today. So far it only applies in England and Wales. Well, the Justice Minister Naomi Long says discussions with London have been frustrating.
Obviously we're very disappointed that Minister Kevin Hollinrick has decided to go ahead today with the post office convictions expulsion legislation without including Northern Ireland and indeed Scotland. We became aware that he was going to do so yesterday when they shared a draft of the legislation with us. It was particularly disappointing because earlier in the day the First and Deputy First Minister had sought reassurances from Steve Baker as Minister of State and from Michael Gove as the Secretary of State for Levelling Up. And they seemed open and flexible about the inclusion of Northern Ireland in that legislation. So it is particularly frustrating that they've decided to proceed without it.
But the Justice Minister added she's hopeful a solution can be found.
I don't think all is lost. I think there is still an opportunity at amendment stage for us to be able to get those amendments done. If government don't do it, then I would hope that some of our MPs will step up and do that and hope that the government would then accept those amendments.
Well, we have Solicitor Michael Madden with us, who represents about 30 people from here who were caught up in that scandal. Michael, you're seeking clarification from the Justice Minister on what's going to happen here. First of all, before we get into that, just to clarify as to why this isn't being applied here, or indeed Scotland, is this just simply the devolution of judicial powers to here and Westminster saying, look, we can't do it, or is there anything else to it?
Well, it's a good question. It's a question I don't know the answer to. There hasn't been any explanation given. I have sought some clarification from Minister Long, and I know the Minister and the rest of the Executive have expressed strong desire to have the legislation come in one way or another. Obviously, the quickest way for that to happen would be through the UK Westminster legislation. Why the decision's been taken not to include Northern Ireland and Scotland, I just don't know.
I'm just wondering, have you ever received any correspondence back from the Justice Minister? Maybe she's not fully aware as to why it wasn't included in this.
No, I haven't. I've heard what you said today, where she was given some indications possibly that there would be flexibility, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to have come to fruition. I have also asked Minister Long if there's any consideration given to introducing legislation here in Stormont, because that obviously would be the next step then.
Yeah, because of course when this was first mooted, we didn't have an executive, did we, when this was first appeared as a bill?
That's right. So I don't know if that's any reason why that hasn't been included in today's decision, but that was the position at the time.
All in all, though, there's those 30 or so people that you represent who, much like yourself, if their solicitor doesn't know what's going on, they certainly have no idea what's going on.
It's very frustrating. The uncertainty sort of adds to the distress that's ongoing as well. It's quite difficult whenever hope has been raised for people that this legislation is going to come in, and then there's more hurdles put in place, so it does tend to add to the anxiety that's already been felt by people in this situation.
Michael, just to be clear then, because obviously the argument has moved on slightly across the water, because they're now talking about compensation and the difficulty even within that, the people who are kind of getting it automatically, some who've been offered a set amount if they go away and take it and move on quietly. But our people aren't even at that stage yet, are they?
No, there's different schemes. The scheme that would compensate people who have convictions overturned, that can't take place. That next step can't take place until the convictions are overturned. Yeah. So it's dependent on that legislation coming in to overturn the convictions.
So how many of is that your 30 people? Are they all people who have been convicted?
No, I think out of that 30 people, I've had probably 4 would meet the criteria that was announced today. I've had one other client who has had his conviction overturned in the courts here in Northern Ireland, but from the criteria that was announced today, potentially another 4 people could have their convictions overturned.
And it's frustrating as well, because there are obviously 2 things happening. You want your conviction overturned, you want your name cleared, but you also want compensation for what's happened to you. And this is going back 20 years. It's always worth remembering that.
Yes, my clients, certainly the first priority that they want is to have their reputations restored, to be exonerated, to have the convictions overturned, and then clearly they are entitled to have the compensation which would hopefully benefit their lives after a long time of suffering. So it's to be welcomed once that can come in.
And what about those other people then that make up the 30? What position are they in?
Again, various different categories, but probably the largest category would be people who were accused of having shortfalls, so accused of having money that had essentially gone missing, turned out then to be phantom missing money, and they have had to pay out of their own pocket these shortfalls. Most of them then have had lost their employment, and with that their reputation as well. So they may as well have had convictions because they had lost their reputations.
And what are they saying to you then about this? Because it feels the injustice is so staggering in the first instance, but now we have they're kind of the second-class citizens of this overall group, because we're sitting here, obviously Scottish people will feel the same, that they're kind of outside of this big debate that's happening and feels as if it has some momentum in England.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, very frustrating. Whenever there do seem to be steps forward, there does seem then another hurdle put in the way. So if it does come down to legislation in Stormont to be passed, that could take, I don't know, it could take some time. I know there's a huge backlog of work still to be processed.
Funny, I'm actually just reading a piece in the Herald, the Scottish paper, in the past 15 minutes or so. It's been published. This isn't our own BBC copy, but it does say that Kevin Hollinrake, who would be the minister responsible for the post office, saying that given justice was devolved in Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's for dissolved administrations to act. But Hamza Yousaf says the Scottish-specific legislation could only be brought forward when the UK government's bill has passed each of its parliamentary stages in Westminster. Now, maybe I'm being unfair, I'm bouncing you into constitutional law here, Michael, but that would suggest that you've got to wait for the legislation to get through all its various things, through the Lords, all that, carry on, and then Stormont can begin their process. Would that make sense? Would that seem like the way it might have to happen?
Potentially. There's certain grey areas, and the arguments could be made politically, and potentially it could end up in a challenge and have these constitutional issues challenged and discussed in the courts as well. So all these options are open.
But then that sounds like a delay as well, right there.
That doesn't happen quickly.
No. Unfortunately, it's hard to try and find a quick fix to this, but it's just hard to see one at the moment.
OK, Michael, thanks very much, and thanks for coming in. Michael Madden there, solicitor representing some of the post office people who've been caught up in the scandal.